Welcome to the January 2026 meeting of the Delta ISB, and not too late to say Happy New Year to everyone. I call the meeting to order and turn over to Jonathan Wang for some housekeeping information.
Yeah, hope you can hear me clearly. Just a couple items. So we are here in the Natural Resources Building, and in the event of an evacuation at the building, everyone should remain calm, take your belongings, and proceed to the nearest exit to the building. Staff will gather at the evacuation point at 1615 9th Street, and the public is welcome to join us at that location. And also note that there's no food and beverages where we are at. Thank you.
Okay, so I hope everybody was able to hear that. It wasn't terribly clear, but please let us know if it wasn't clear. So just for a brief overview of the public comment process, we will take written questions and comments throughout the meeting. Please follow the instructions on your screen and on the meeting notice. I'll move on to roll call to establish a quorum and declarations of members. Peter?
Yes, Peter Goodwin. Good morning, everyone. No new declarations.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Kathleen Jones. I have an adjunct professorship appointment at Purdue University recently.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Tanya?
Anya Heikala, no new declarations.
Steve?
Steve Lindley, no new declarations.
Is Diane here yet? No, don't hear her. So we'll ask her later. Anna?
Anna Mikulak, no new declarations.
Obi?
Jayanta Abedsekar, no new declaration.
Thank you. Kenny?
Kenny Rose, no new declarations.
And Lisa?
Lisa Wanger, no new declarations.
Thank you. And I'm Inge Wener, and I have no new declarations. So a brief overview of the agenda. We will today discuss the draft Delta Science Plan and our review. We will also get a presentation by the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy. They will provide an update on the Delta Carbon team's work and how their work is helping to address the needs identified in the Delta ISB's draft Subsidence review. This will help inform revisions to the Subsidence review. Are there any public comments right now?
There are none.
All right. And we move on to agenda item 2, which is the Delta ISB Chair's report and business matters. I'd like to provide some updates on ongoing Delta ISB activities for the decision-making under deep uncertainty review, which focused on scientific tools and concepts that can increase the capacity to anticipate and adapt to growing uncertainty of future conditions in the Bay Delta system. We have a little bit of news. The manuscript that was submitted to San Francisco Estuary and Watershed Sciences for a special issue on post-normal decision-making has now been reviewed, and the comments have been responded to, and the manuscript is back at the journal right now. So hopefully, I'm not sure when the issue is coming out, but we will certainly inform you. The effort on this manuscript was led by Dr. Shoko Shinbrook of the Council's Delta Science Program, She is also part of the Delta ISB staff support team. Secondly, the contaminants monitoring review. We don't have a lot of news since the last time. This review will assess current contaminant monitoring programs in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. We have started in November, we have started with a series of interviews with experts to gain an understanding of the regulatory landscape, driving contaminant monitoring, and the thresholds or triggers prompting management actions. We are in the process of scheduling more interviews for February, so there's a lot more to come in the next month. On the Emerging Climate Science Symposium, which was hosted in September 2025 at UC Davis. The review leads are currently still working on a summary memo of key highlights for a non-technical audience. So that's the brief update. We will hear more on the Subsidence review later today. In December, we also started brainstorming on topics for future reviews at our planning retreat in December. Some of the topics that have risen to the top include harmful algal blooms with a focus on mitigation, structured decision-making, and nature-based solutions. Leads have been assigned to explore the scopes of the reviews, and this scoping might involve conducting scoping interviews with subject matter experts, working with staff to organize informational presentations to the board, and also attend events of interest related to the subject matter. If warranted, a prospectus, which we call a brief work plan, may be developed that describes the scope of the review. Two other topics discussed at the planning retreat were prioritized. One is collaborative science. This topic is based on recommendations of a review on State Water Project and Central Valley Project operations by a committee of the National Academy of Sciences led by Dr. Goodwin. Before moving forward with scoping out this review on collaborative science, we would like to see what kind of feedback is received on the recommendations from the National Academy of Science group's review. A second topic we briefly discussed or talked about, or activity, I should say, not so much topic, a follow-up to the Emerging Climate Science Symposium is considered. We will have to wait, though, until after the products of the first symposium are complete to provide better direction on what is needed. So which of these review topics we will ultimately pursue will depend on the results of the scoping efforts. Other review topics may be proposed by board members at any time, and we can discuss them when somebody comes forward with that. Since the last meeting, we received one public correspondence, one letter from Restore the Delta. It was feedback on the Delta Stewardship Council public engagement. And I don't know whether you've read the letter or had time to read the letter. There was a lot of shuffling about in the agenda in the December meeting, and this was very difficult for the public to follow, I think. So we apologize for the issues related to delays in the agenda that occurred at that meeting, which are highlighted in this letter. And this led to us missing the comment by Spencer Fern of Restore the Delta. We're very sorry. Please be assured that we welcome and value comments from the public. I hope this doesn't happen again. We appreciate the comments that you made, and we will do better in the future to ensure we are clear about timing, especially when there are delays in the agenda. Are there any public comments right now?
There are none.
All right. Well,
But
then-
Diane has joined, so you may want to.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Diane, do you have any declarations?
No, I have no declarations. I apologize. I was at a coffee shop and it's too noisy. So now I'm sitting outside here in Boulder, Colorado. So I can hear you well, but I'm wearing my jacket. So
It looks kind of cold. Yeah.
it's kind of cold, but anyway, sorry about that.
All right. Okay, agenda item 3 then is an update on the Delta Carbon team and the Delta ISB Subsidence review. Welcome Lauren Damon of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy. I'll give a little bit of background before I hand over to you. The Delta ISB is currently working to address public comments on its draft review, which is called Science to Inform Management of Subsided Lands in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. Public comments were received from Caltrans, Steve Deverell, Gilbert Cozio, Delta Conservancy, Delta Science Program, and Tamara Krause. To help inform revisions to the review, Lauren Damon I already told you where she's from, of the Delta Conservancy, will provide an update on the Delta Carbon team's work and how it is helping to address the needs identified in the draft Subsidence review. The Delta Carbon team was formed in May 2025 by the Delta Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy, partly in response to the Delta ISB Subsidence review. So I welcome and I'll hand over to Lauren Damon.
Thank you, Chair Werner. And I want to say good morning, but I know it's not morning for everybody, so good whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thanks for the invitation to give this update and for your attention today. I'm looking forward to sharing what the Carbon team has been working on. Many of the members of the Carbon team participated in the workshop in October of 2023. And so even prior to the formation of the Carbon team, we've been taking advantage of the momentum that was generated since that event. We're all very grateful for the draft document that was released by the ISB, titled The Science to Inform Management of Subsided Lands in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, as it's helped set direction and priority for our work. Throughout this talk, when I say the draft subsidence review, that's the document that I'm referring to. I just, like Chair Werner, don't want to have to say the full title every single time. So that's the document that I'm referring to if I say draft review or draft subsidence review. And specifically the recent draft that was released October of 2025. The Carbon team just had its 4th meeting, and so we're really excited to share our updates. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background about the Delta Conservancy. We're a small agency. We currently accomplish our mission with 14 staff. The Conservancy, again, I shortened that, Delta Conservancy or Conservancy for today, was created to serve as the primary state agency that implements ecosystem restoration in the Delta and supporting efforts that advance environmental protection and economic well-being of Delta residents. We've done this primarily by providing grants that fund community enhancement, sustainable working lands, and ecosystem restoration. Our service area covers both the statutory Delta and Sassoon Marsh. We report to an 11-member board, which is comprised of members that represent the state of California, local governments, and various stakeholders throughout the Delta region. In this role, the Conservancy serves as a liaison between the state and the Delta. Next slide, please. In 2012, we adopted a climate change policy, and this helped guide our efforts to support subsidence and emissions reductions projects. This resulted in funding work like the development of the carbon market wetland methodology for avoided emissions that was published in 2017. In 2022, we received a one-time general fund allocation of $36 million. We used this funding on 4 landscape scale pilot projects, which will ultimately result in about 11,000 re-wetted acres in the deeply subsided portion of the Delta. The subsidence workshop occurred around the same time that we were awarding funding and we were initiating these projects. And so we were able to incorporate some of the shared learning from that workshop into those projects as we were initiating them. Around that same time, we also expanded our internal carbon program, and we were starting to recognize the wider need for a collaborative carbon group to support advancement of subsidence reversal projects in the Delta. Next slide. There's about 150,000 acres of deeply subsided land in the Delta, and this is the area of focus for the subsidence management work by the Delta Conservancy and by the carbon team. In the map that I'm showing, taken from the recent restoration summary paper by Chappell et al., land elevation is shown on the map by color gradient, starting with green, which is land above sea level, to maroon, which is land below sea level. What you can see is that the deeply subsided area is about 20% of the legal delta and about 30% of the primary zone. In a paper published by Mountain Twists in 2005, they called that open space that was left by subsidence the anthropogenic accommodation space and projected it to be more than 3 billion cubic meters by 2050. If you convert this into a water volume, so for example, if this filled with water from a catastrophic levee breach, that's over 2.4 million acre feet. Oh, can you go back, please? That's over 2.4 million acre feet of water that would fill that empty space. They describe this space as, quote, landscape scale measure of potential consequence of subsidence within the Delta. When levee breaches occur on deeply subsided islands, rapid filling draws brackish water into the Delta, temporarily degrading water quality over a large region, known colloquially as the Big Gulf, end quote. The degraded water quality puts statewide water supply, local communities, and the ecosystem all at risk. The ongoing subsidence is also a source of carbon emissions, currently releasing about 1.2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents into the atmosphere per year. The state has recognized that we won't be able to achieve carbon neutrality goals without addressing the ongoing subsidence from our natural and working lands throughout California. But the Delta is a really large source of carbon emissions, accounting for over 13% of the cropland emissions, but only 2% of the land area. And so the California Natural Resources Agency has developed a natural and working lands climate smart strategy. The strategy has restoration targets for a variety of ecosystem types, including wetlands. And within the wetland restoration target, there's a very specific 50,000 acre rewetting target that is just specific to the Delta. The natural and working lands goal is to re-wet 50,000 acres of highly organic soils in the Delta by 2045. We have started making progress towards this goal, but still have a long road ahead to achieve that goal and reduce flood risk. The biggest need is additional resources and support, specifically, of course, funding to get there. The yellow polygons on the map are the non-title projects that are in various stages of planning and implementation. So this is kind of an idea of how much of the maroon area we still have left to be addressed. What's not shown on the map is rice that either was not state funded or private farms that are part of the state funded incentive program. So the total rice in the Delta has likely exceeded 20,000 acres. And again, that's not shown on the map, and that will help subsidence, but it doesn't all count towards the rewetting goal. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, the Delta Conservancy funded 4 landscape scale projects to put what we've learned to date about subsidence management into practice. The largest project was a WebTrack mosaic project. The Metropolitan Water District of Southern California owns 4 islands in the Delta, and this includes WebTrack. WebTrack is a 5,500 acre island that is currently being put into a mosaic of rice and managed wetlands. Nearly the entire island will be re-wetted over time, with the deepest portions re-wetted first to allow that soil to accrete, and then additional acreage will be inundated as the wetlands mature and land elevation increases. The mosaic approach is being used to explore various revenue options, including polluticulture and carbon farming, with the goal of achieving economic sustainability of the island, including all of its maintenance. Metropolitan also recently leased the entirety of Bacon Island for rice farming. Rice conversion on Bacon Island will be phased in over the next 5 or more years. The Nature Conservancy owns Staten Island, which is a wildlife-friendly and self-sustaining working farm that's operated by conservation farms and ranches. They have self-converted over 4,000 acres of corn to rice on the southern portion of the island, which is the most deeply subsided portion, and are planning an additional 1,000-acre wetland. Water will be circulated around the island from the rice into the wetlands, which will improve water quality of the rice effluent and reduce consumptive water use of the wetlands. Funding for the wetland has so far come from state funds, including the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Delta Conservancy. The Nature Conservancy is planning to privately fund about half of those wetlands in order to conduct an economic analysis on the cost to implement privately funded versus publicly funded wetlands. This will help inform landowners on the feasibility and economic viability of replacing existing crops with wetlands for carbon farming and or polluticulture. During the Subsidence workshop, panel 3 was about inundated agricultural practices. The one that was primarily discussed was rice, and how they can be effective short-term solution to halting subsidence. It was acknowledged that the initial cost to convert to rice is likely to preclude farmers from including rice in their crop rotations. Rice conversion is generally recognized to cost about $800 to $1,000 per acre, but it can cost significantly more. And this is due to the cost of land leveling and required water infrastructure. One of the agricultural practices in the Delta recommendations made by the ISB in the draft review was that further investigation and development of incentive programs to incentivize rice or other polluticulture. So shortly after the workshop, the Nature Conservancy received funding from the Delta Conservancy to conduct a rice incentive program. In the 2 years since that program has been running, 10 farmers enrolled 4,000 acres of rice, which we think demonstrates the agricultural community's interest in rice cultivation with a support for the initial conversion costs. The fields from that program are also being monitored for land elevation changes and carbon flux, which will further our understanding of rice cultivation's benefit as a subsidence management and emissions avoidance practice. Given the success of that program, we've also been working with the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the California Air Resources Board to adopt rice into the Healthy Soils program. This will offer additional farmer incentives for crop conversion and for just growing rice. It's anticipated that rice will be included in the next solicitation. Next slide, please. So the Delta Carbon team is focused mostly on reversing subsidence and reducing associated greenhouse gas emissions from highly organic soils in the Delta. Given that the ongoing emissions and risks associated with subsidence, we're focused on implementing solutions and removing barriers to implementation, both in the short and longer term. We felt it was important to bring everyone working in this space together so that we can increase efficiency and make meaningful progress. I think a really important part of the carbon team is increased partnerships that will result in more resources and more robust science. During the first meeting of the carbon team last May, we went around and developed a list of tools and resources that we all thought would advance implementation of subsidence reversal projects. We organized this list into short-term opportunities that could be implemented quickly or would lead to near-term change. And then we also organized them into longer-term efforts that would require more time or more resources, but were still very important to achieving the Delta's co-equal goals. We used this list to set our priorities, and then we created sub-teams that would work on those priorities. So the list of our sub-teams are on this slide. Next slide, please. So the research sub-team is focused on filling data gaps that increase our understanding of managed subsided lands. They are currently working on a proposal to investigate walking wetlands in the Delta. This is a practice that has been implemented in other regions and is where crops are periodically rotated in the sort of fallow flooding that allows natural wetland plants to establish for 1 or 2 years. The proposal is to test this rotation with rice, and our hypothesis is that it will increase crop yield and increase land elevation. The proposal will also test how rice management practices affect carbon emissions of the walking wetlands, including methane, specifically methane. Walking wetlands could potentially be a win-win option for subsidence management and agriculture in the Delta, offering a relatively fast solutions for farmers, landowners, and the state. So it became a high priority for the carbon team to start exploring. The research sub-team will address other questions. This one was the one that came to the top and was our big priority. Next slide, please. The data sub-team is working on an inventory of existing carbon-related data sets so that we have clarity on what is available and we can identify gaps that need to be filled. Using other experts on the carbon team, they are also working to identify the barriers to accessing carbon data so they can work to improve accessibility. Our hope is to be able to support the data needs of the newly formed data synthesis group and anyone else who's hoping to analyze and synthesize carbon data in the Delta. The carbon market sub-team is working on the sale of the first wetland carbon credits. As mentioned in the draft report, the revenue that's generated from the carbon market could increase landowner interest in wetlands if it's enough to replace or exceed agricultural revenue, particularly on land that has become too wet to farm. The Department of Water Resources has carbon credits available to sell and is addressing a state administrative hurdle to selling those credits. While we don't know the actual value of wetland credits until they're sold, which is why the urgency in trying to get some sold, the carbon team includes carbon market experts that are seeing really amazing growth in the market over the last decade or so. They're projecting that carbon credits could possibly compete with other commodities being grown. So we feel really optimistic about this being able to replace agricultural revenue. The carbon market sub-team is also working on marketing materials and educating potential buyers on the benefit of wetland credits beyond just avoided emissions, such as biodiversity and community, and on the voluntary market that could attract different types of buyers. Next slide, please. The agency rules sub-team is working on identifying and addressing administrative barriers that exist to subsidence management practices due to various local, state, and federal entity policies. An example of one of the barriers identified by the agency rules sub-team is limitations on county agricultural zoning codes, carbon farming and polluticulture, both of which are practices that can generate revenue through the sale of either carbon credits or selling above ground biomass from wetlands, are not recognized as agriculture and zoning codes of many Delta counties. The team is looking into this to see what opportunities might exist to make those additions. The flood funding sub-team is looking outside of the box for funding sources for subsidence reversal projects by considering subsidence reversal a flood control project rather than simply a restoration or ecosystem project. They most recently met with a nonprofit in the Sierra Nevadas that has been working with public utilities on climate-related disaster funding, and we think this could be replicated in the Delta. We are early in the discussions, but we think that this could be a really great opportunity to bring in some additional funding. And finally, the review paper sub-team is working on a current science review paper for publication that would serve as an entry point into the biogeochemistry of carbon emissions in Delta soils. The carbon team has previously identified that in order to estimate emissions reductions from rice conversion, this required looking at different values published in at least 3 different scientific papers, and then you needed to do the additional calculation yourself. So our hope is to have a paper that's a one-stop shop for what is known so far in the Delta about subsidence reduction practices and then their avoided emissions, to simply and clearly state where we are now so we know where we need to go. Next slide, please. Now that we're approaching our 1 year of being a team, we're looking at how we can provide additional value. The sub-teams are planning to continue the work that they've been working on with additional data and information gaps being filled. We're also hoping to add community outreach and social science components to the work, but we need to build capacity in those areas. In the next year, we have 3 additional places where we see our team providing input and support. The first is on the wetland methodology review. The American Carbon Registry reviews all methodologies as a standard every 10 years. and so has initiated their review for the wetland methodology. Unfortunately, this means the methodology is inactive while the review is underway, so no new projects can register. To facilitate and hopefully expedite the review so we can open it back up again, the carbon team is willing to provide expertise and input wherever possible. The second place we'd like to provide additional support is on new restoration project design. As new projects are coming out and with funding from the climate bond, the project team is hoping to offer design input so that we can ensure that new restoration projects have maximized carbon benefits. And finally, the team is also looking to be responsive to management needs and also guide policy change as appropriate. We think that we're doing a pretty good job right now, but we're happy to take feedback from you all on how you think we can be most effective in this way or other suggestions that you have in that area. So I'll leave you with this closing thought that managing for subsidence in the Delta will continue to require considerable funding in the future. As land continues to subside, the cost of construction will increase. However, this is likely a much smaller investment than a big gulp, damaging local resources, harming the ecosystem, and compromising the state's water supply for at least several months. This becomes even more urgent as we look ahead for sea level rise and storm volatility associated with climate change and the additional pressure that will put on our levees and all of our resources. So while the carbon team, the Delta Conservancy, and others are working step by step to remove barriers, develop incentives, and fine-tune our understanding of methane emissions from rewetted soils, the big picture is that landscape scale action is needed rapidly to halt subsidence and reduce risk to the Delta and all of California. You can go to the next slide, please. So I appreciate your time, interest, and attention to this and giving me this opportunity, and just want to acknowledge all the members of the carbon team. It's been really fun and exciting and energizing to work with everyone on the team. They've been really motivated, and it's been a really awesome experience. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for this overview. Very interesting talk. We have lots of time for questions and discussion. So I'd like to open it up for questions from the board. I can't see everyone. So, okay, I see raised hands. Lisa.
Thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. I just really want to commend your group for thinking very clearly about the issues. I think you've done a nice job bringing in sort of the economic incentives and the science and the understanding that people need clear science to make decisions. So great job. My only question is, I have some comments for you about how you might expand the program, but I don't want to offer those until I say this point, which is, are we sure we're getting net benefits? I mean, you bring up the methane issue. We know this is a concern. So are you going to try to establish that as a next step before expanding?
Yeah, so I think we are relying on the wetland methodology currently that does indicate, has gone through the science and has been reviewed by the American Carbon Registry. That does indicate that there's net benefits. I think that we're kind of in the fine-tuning stage of various practices. So for example, like the walking wetlands, right? Like we're looking specifically closely at how different management practices affect emissions. But I think overall, we have a pretty good sense that have a net positive impact, because we're talking about like from baseline, and the baseline right now is net emissions. And so we're avoiding that net. And that's what the methodology indicates. I think also that's kind of the purpose behind wanting to do that review paper. We walked through this when we were looking at the Healthy Soils program. It was actually really hard in the literature to kind of understand that rice was a net positive, because there wasn't a clear paper that we could point to that said, like, this is the number, this is what we can expect on average for avoided emissions with rice. So like I mentioned, it took like 3 different papers, and we had to look at the values of those and their appendices, and then do a couple of some more additional math. And then it was very clear that there was a net benefit from rice. And so I think having that review paper too will just spell out that science a lot more clearly and make it more apparent. And then, yeah, we're kind of in the fine tuning phase with managing, or we're in the fine tuning phase of like how we can manage for above ground biomass and do a better job and maximize the carbon benefits. But I think what we have so far indicates that from baseline, it's a net positive. And I think also looking from the perspective of if our ultimate goal is subsidence reversal, that being like the biggest risk is just stopping subsidence. My opinion is that, you know, we need to really focus on like stopping subsidence first.
All right. Does that, okay, we have other hands raised up, so I'll move if Lisa is okay with this response, then we'll move on to Anna.
Thanks, Inge. So you're already starting to inch towards the answer to my question. I was also really curious about the carbon offsets, and I guess a few things about them. So one, I'm very curious if how MRV of those offsets either is being done or will be done. What is the approach that will be used to verify that whatever benefit is being included in the sale of those offsets is actually realized? That was one question. Second question was, are all of the offsets related to avoided emissions, or are you also exploring actual sequestration based offsets related to subsidence reversal or whatnot? And then third, I'm just curious, has there been an assessment of what is the upper end of the scale in terms of total offsets that could be enabled in the region in tons?
So I'll start by saying that I'm not like a soil scientist, so I'm probably not the person to comment about the science, but I can say big picture wise that the methodology is what we lean to for support on the avoided emissions protocol. And when the sale of carbon credits, so the way that the carbon crediting works is that we use the methodology to quantify the credits, and then that needs to get verified by a third-party verifier. And then, so the American Carbon Registry has certified that the methodology is good and that the carbon credits are quantified appropriately and that they're verified appropriately, and then they have control over the sale of them. And so I think all of that with, like looking at the method, like leaning on that methodology and the avoided emissions, we've done the work and we've the science has been done on that. I would kick it to somebody else to say what the upper end is. I don't know if anybody else is on the call that has I don't know if Steve Deverell or maybe Campbell's on the call that can talk about the upper end of what we can hope to have, but right now it's just
and just to confirm, they're all based on avoided emissions, not on sequestration.
That's right. Yeah, it's all avoided emissions right now.
Yeah, and Inge, Campbell Ingram is on the call and he has his hand raised.
All right, so if he wants to speak to just this topic, maybe we should let him speak first.
Yes, Campbell, you should have the ability to unmute your microphone.
Great. Excuse me. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here. I know I just wanted to just assist a little bit. I think, as you mentioned, yes, it is an avoided emissions protocol. Absolutely. But certainly there is below ground sequestration. But again, that's really swamped by the methane production. And what you're really going after here is the avoided emission from the baseline, which is up to 10 tons per acre in many spots. We've seen it up to 30 tons per acre in other spots.
This
so
is
when
per
you
year? Sorry, quick question. That's per year?
Yes, accurate. Yes, that's correct. And so then when we consider this roughly 150,000 acre area in the Delta at 10 tons avoided emissions per acre. It's about 1.2 to 1.5 million tons per year of potential avoided emissions. So, so that's sort of the high level numbers that we think about.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Thank you very much, Campbell. Thank you. So Anna, is your question answered? Okay. Okay, let's move on to Tanya then.
Yeah, Lauren, thank you so much for the presentation. It was really informative, and it's just great to see how much work is being done on the subsidence issue over the last couple of years. And having been part of the writing group that put together our subsidence review draft for the ISB, and realizing that, you know, it's such a dynamic landscape right now. I guess one of my questions for you is just very simple, which is, would you have any sort of report available from the information that you had in these slides, something that we could refer to in the as we're working through this draft subsidence review and maybe updating it to try to at least acknowledge some of the current activities? Is there something written in a formal report or resources from your presentation that you could make available to the ISB?
I'm happy to share the slides if that's helpful. We are working on formalizing our charter, so that could be used as a resource. We're also, I put the link to our Delta Carbon Program webpage, the Delta Conservancy's Carbon Program webpage. That is also being updated right now. So we're working on that update, and we'll put like the notes and the agendas and the recordings of the meetings. And then we're also planning on sending out like monthly updates on the sub team. So none of that has been done yet, but that's something that we're going to be working towards very soon. So that will be available soon, but not otherwise not a report so far.
Okay, that's just helpful to know. Yeah, and then my other question is more related to, I guess, some of the social science issues. You mentioned there is a need to bring in some social science expertise. One question specifically in that domain is, do you have anyone with economics background or agricultural economics that's working on just the incentive program piece and really trying to understand, you know, how that financial incentive structure could work best, and working with the farmers to get the best information, at least on not just the upfront costs of transitioning into rice, but, you know, rice relative to other crops and also the polluticulture value. Is there anyone on the team with that level of expertise?
We haven't formalized anything like that yet. And we, you know, we've only had 4 meetings so far. So we do have people that kind of like pop in and out, but not like a consistent, membership yet. So yeah, that is something that we want to work on. It just hasn't been something that we've been able to like focus heavily on yet. I think also with some of like the political climate happening right now, we just kind of wanted to like hold off on doing a lot of outreach.
Sure.
But yeah, that it is definitely something we want to pursue and are hoping to do exactly what you described, and hoping to recruit some more folks that can tackle more of that like economic and social piece of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
We have some, but I think we could recruit more.
Terrific. Yeah, that's all I had for now. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. And next is Diane.
Thank you so much for your report out about the progress. Like Tanya, I was very involved in the writing and preparation for the workshop, and certainly it's exciting to see the progress and this draft report. I have a comment related to the review paper on biogeochemistry. I can see that would be very useful, and based on having covered that part of our report. And there were 2 issues that came out that were really critical to get at these economic considerations. So in addition to reviewing and synthesizing what's published, highlighting what we need, what's needed to be known. There was indication that there was a sweet spot in terms of the sulfate concentration where it wouldn't be too high to have an impairment of water quality, but the sulfate could suppress the methane production.
Diane? Oh, I'm sorry. At least on my end, Diane is frozen. Can others see that too?
She's frozen.
She's frozen. Ah, too bad. Okay, so we'll move on to Steve for now and hope that Diane will make it back because that sounded really interesting.
I also thank you, Lauren, for your great presentation. And I think my question may be a little bit related to
I
what Diane.
apologize. Can I just jump in before my computer dies again?
Sorry, Steve.
I think my computer is getting colder faster than I am. So anyway, my other point, just to finish, is there was an additional biogeochemistry question was related to the initial findings that over time, the methane production decreases. So some of these methane calculations for these trade-offs are based on 1 or 2 years of data, whereas Dennis Boldaki showed data that the methane production after rewetting dropped by an order of magnitude 5, 6, 7 years later. So that's really important in terms of identifying what is the time point at which methane is not a problem. And so the only way to get at this is to actually measure it. And it may be variable, but there's highlighting in your review paper, not only, the synthesis, but what are some key issues, but from new data that would be critical for understanding the carbon capture, reduced emissions aspect. So I'm going to go inside and I apologize for this, but I just wanted those 2 points. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Diane.
Thanks, Diane. I also, so on her point, I don't know if she can still hear, but just generally on her point with that the data sub team is looking into carbon data that is available. So in the subsidence review, there was that map that has the eddy covariance tower, the flux towers that are already existing in the Delta. And so we do have some long-term monitoring data that UC Berkeley and CSU East Bay has been collecting for a while. And so the hope is that once we have like an inventory of that data and we know what we have, we can use that to potentially answer the question that Diane is referring to about like decreasing methane production over time. Because we may already have some of the information, it just needs to be worked out.
Great, thank you. All right, back to you, Steve.
Okay, so I think I might have a somewhat related question. As I understand it, these soils are getting rebuilt through irrigation with fresh water of plants to build up soil carbon that would then make a very carbon-rich soil. But the original soils probably had some, perhaps significant amounts of mineral content from eroded materials that are getting deposited in the Delta, and then periodically less than fully fresh water. And I'm wondering if this kind of difference in the way the soils are being created might have any kind of long-term consequences for soil stability or the chemistry going on, or the biology for that matter, if that's been something people have thought about at all.
I see Campbell's hand. I'm hesitating because I like have some sense of like how the Delta was formed, and so I want to speak to that because my like personal opinion is that the interior of the islands had less mineral soils because that mineral soil was deposited like as natural levees from upstream like river flow, and so the interior of the islands so I think that this probably won't have much of an impact, but this is outside of my area of expertise, so I don't want to say anything else about that we haven't talked about it on the carbon team, but that is an interesting point to bring up and look into.
Is there somebody else in the audience who would like to speak to this?
Yeah.
Kim?
Inge, Campbell does have his hand raised. Campbell, you do have your microphone ability to unmute, so you could respond if you have a response.
Sure. Great, thanks. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself previously. I'm Campbell Ingram, Executive Officer, Delta Conservancy. Not sure I've met all of you in the past, but so yeah, I mean, clearly the sediment supply is no longer there. That's intermixing with building those soils. But I do think that what we're really looking at here is trying to look at long-term viability of these islands and ultimately keeping them wet into the future, either through managed wetland and or rice cultivation, or even a transition to mostly managed wetland into the future. So I think in terms of soil stability, you are going to lack that mineral component, but hopefully it still remains a wetland into the future, and making sure that it's economically viable to be able to do that, I think is really the focus at this point.
Okay, thank you, Campbell. Kathleen has her hand up. Kathleen, please go.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It was very informative. I learned quite a lot, and I'm very impressed with what y'all are doing. I have a question, though, about whether you quantify your subsidence reversal. Do you do any measurements of the accretion rates that are occurring and how fast that's going to build elevation on these sites?
Yeah, so the projects that the Delta Conservancy has funded, that is a component of them. We are doing land elevation measurements. So we will be measuring that. The projects, the period of which that we're funding them is only 5 years. So we're likely not to see a lot over the 5-year period. But yes, it is being measured, and the hope would be that the project proponents will continue doing those measurements because they'll have the instruments out there to keep doing that.
I was wondering what instruments you use.
I'm a coordinator for all this stuff. I'm not the person who does it, so I don't. We have eddy covariance towers out there, and I'm not sure what else for land surface elevation is specifically. Thank you, Lisa Marie.
All right. Thank you. Lisa Marie has her hand up.
Oh, just only to back up Lauren, that yeah, there's multiple ways to get elevation gain. The gold standard is surface elevation tables or sediment erosion tables, SETs, and it's been a long time goal of this whole group that's been working out there to get a network of SETs out there, so you're actually measuring not just shallow subsidence, but also actual gains. You're getting actual elevation gain. And so, if that's the goal, I think that the Conservancy was highlighting even beyond carbon credits, basically, more support for getting elevation tables out there, and accretion measurements would be a big science advance for us.
Yeah. Yeah, set tables are pretty expensive. Maybe some of these feldspar horizon measurements over the longer term would be good.
All right. Did you want to respond to that again, Lauren or Lisa Marie? No?
Yeah, that's the idea of having a marked horizon, and then you're measuring above that. So it could be feldspar or glitter, or there's like a million things you can put down. But that is actually being done right now, Kathleen. So yeah, I'd like to see maybe SETs into the future, because it's okay to do accretion that way, but you're missing shallow subsidence, which, to get to the question that Steve had about putting sediment back on there, one of the concerns is that would compress the peat soils, particularly in the center of the island. So the density of mineral soils is so much greater. It's like orders of magnitude greater than peat. So it would be of concern of just dumping sediment. Anyway, all of this is to be explored and studied. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, and thank you, Lauren, for that presentation. It's great to see all the works going on. And of course, the Conservancy do a really great job working across the community in the Delta. I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit. You mentioned barriers, and of course, resources is a very big barrier. But I wondered if you could just perhaps highlight what are one or two other major barriers that you see perhaps compromising or making this program as successful as it could be.
Yeah, so one of the other examples that I gave was like, so the agency rules team, there are some like policies or guidance that some agencies have that just because of the way things have always been done kind of operate as a barrier. So the example I gave was like county zoning laws. Wetlands actually are not included in county zoning. And so like if an island is zoned for agriculture, wetlands don't fit into the very specific definition of agriculture. And so that could be a potential barrier to putting like a wetland on a property, for example. So that was the one that comes to mind, is like agency type rules of certain things. The other ones would be like, so with the walking wetlands, one of the concerns is if the land, like there may be some hesitancy to a landowner doing a walking wetland, because if they put a wetland on their property, they may be required by an agency to keep it long-term. And so they may be resistant to even doing it in the short term, because they may never be able to like go out of the wetland and go back to agriculture. So that is a manageable concern. There's things that we can do to help manage that, but that could be a potential barrier to implementation because of just landowner resistance or lack of information, or, you know, an agency has like restrictions in place.
Great, thank you.
All right, I don't see any more raised hands. Am I overlooking anything? No? Because then I'm going to deviate a little bit. I realize that the focus of this talk is, and these projects is carbon, and it sounds really wonderful what you're doing. What I'm always missing in the discussion, though, is with regard to rice farming, expanding the rice farming, is you know, the pesticides employed in the rice farming. I remember a time in the 90s when there were huge issues with fish toxicity further up in the watershed, and the rice farmers in the Sacramento Valley had to then, as a consequence, had to hold their irrigation or their water from their fields for, I can't remember how long, but a considerable amount of time. So pesticides used in rice farming would break down before the water would be released to the river. And I'm sure pesticides used have changed in rice farming, but I just always miss the topic from the discussion. You know, I would love to see things like, well, the rice farming in the Delta will employ integrated pest management, or, you know, even organic farming. Is there any discussion on that, or is that a different group, or is that left to the Irrigated Lands Program, or how does that work?
Is that for me? Do you want me to address that?
If you can. I just wanted to bring up the topic because it never comes up, so.
Yeah, so on Staten Island, so grateful to the Nature Conservancy and conservation farms and ranches. This is one of the perks of doing like a mosaic on an island. So what they've done, and the Delta Conservancy funded a recirculation pump for them. So they're recirculating water between the wetlands and the rice. So they're actually not just discharging water from their rice fields into the Delta that goes back into the wetlands, and then it gives it the opportunity to kind of sit and degrade the pesticides over time before it gets discharged. So there's that as an option. recognizing that not every single farmer in the Delta would be able to recirculate like that on smaller fields, but that's an option for some of like the bigger mosaics and bigger properties. We are also hoping to, and talking about like organic rice anecdotally, that's really hard in the Delta, not necessarily for pesticides, but for like weed control. There's a lot of like weed issues in the Delta just by the nature of the soils. So it's really hard to do like an organic rice, just knowing that anecdotally. The company that is leasing Bacon Island has mentioned to us that they are going to be testing out organic. And so we're really hopeful that they'll be able to work through that and figure out methods. And then we've talked to them about potentially like sharing and educating other farmers in the Delta about their methods and how to do that. So it's hopefully being addressed. I think it's going to be definitely a challenge moving forward, but it is stuff that we're talking about.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear that, because one of our visits in the Delta, I actually asked one of the farmers who was going to farm more rice about this issue, and he said, "Oh, we're only using herbicides," but so which wasn't very comforting. So I'm glad people are thinking about this issue. So thank you very much. Yeah. So, well, we are still way ahead of our agenda, but I'd like to very much thank, oh, hang on. Do we have any more public comments, Edmund?
There are none. I just want to give a few more seconds for folks to raise their hand just to be responsive to Restore the Delta, just to give the folks an opportunity to raise their hand if there's any questions or comments. And it looks like there are none.
There are none. Okay. Well, in that case, I thank Lauren very much for her presentation and for answering our questions. And good luck with your projects, and I hope they will expand and grow and be successful. Thank you, Lauren.
Can I bring up one more barrier? I'm sorry to do this late, but I just want to address Peter's question about the barriers. One of the other major barriers is proximity to like rice infrastructure, like dryers. And currently now wet rice has to be transported pretty long distances, which has its own carbon impact and costs associated with it for farmers. And so having enough rice in the Delta to make that infrastructure cost effective and a co-op in the Delta cost effective to reduce that transportation expense would be really helpful and really incentivize additional rice in the Delta. So that's another barrier that we're hoping to talk more about. And the solution is like more rice in the short term, and that will bring more revenue in. And I think that the acreage that was quoted was like 20 to 30,000 acres of rice, which we are approaching. And so I think we're really quickly getting to the point where adding that infrastructure is going to be cost effective, but needing to install the infrastructure and potentially modify existing facilities. The talk is somewhere in Stockton, like existing factories could be modified to put that infrastructure in would be really helpful.
All right. And I see that Lisa has her hand raised now. So, Lisa.
Just one little parting thought. I won't take long, but
plenty of time.
Okay. Well, to your last point, Lauren, you know, that Tanya already brought up the usefulness of bringing in an economist, and then for this issue, probably an agricultural economist. This can be a sticky issue, a lot of that infrastructure of people not being willing to invest. It's a chicken and an egg problem. So there really is some good learning on that subject. But I also wanted to bring up the idea of, as you're trying to expand the program, there's also quite a lot of research on ways to engage farmers in making changes. And so I encourage you to bring in an extension specialist or other folks who have a lot of experience. And, you know, some of the big take homes are just, you know, getting trusted messengers to talk to folks is really the most key to changing behavior. So I wish you luck with the program.
Thank you.
All right. Do we really have every comment, every question covered now? It looks like it. And then thank you again, Lauren, and good luck with your projects. There are, okay, so Edmund, I'm a little bit at a loss what to do right now because we want to stick to our agenda and we are way ahead of time. Should we have a break? What do you suggest?
I think we can continue because we didn't put a hard time frame for the science plan discussion on the notice.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. In that case, we move on to agenda item 4, which is an update and a discussion on the Delta Science Plan review, or the draft Delta Science Plan review. And we need Diane for that. Is she back? I don't hear anybody. Tanya, do you think you can cover it?
I can give it a shot, Inge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me give the background, and
Yes.
then I'll hand over to you, and you can give it a shot. So over the past few years, the Council's Delta Science Program has been working to update the 2019 Delta Science Plan, a Delta Plan recommended shared framework that provides vision, principles, and approaches for conducting and coordinating science in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, as well as more effectively communicating the outcomes of science activities and their management implications to policymakers. So the Delta Science Program requested a formal review from the Delta ISB at its public meeting in November, on November 12th, 25, and released the draft 2026 Delta Science Plan on November 19th, 2025. The Delta ISB's review was due on January 20, but we will need more time. We have already informed the Delta Science Program that we will submit our final comments after our February meeting, which is on February 18th. I'd like to turn over to Tanya to provide a status update on where we
Diane
are.
is here now, Inge, so we
Oh,
can.
she is?
And she's in her office. She's not out in the cold.
Okay.
I really apologize. Okay. Yeah, I apologize. I thought the best thing to do was just to get to my office. So I apologize for this delay. Yes, in terms of status update, Tanya and I are working on a draft. We have received from members of the board extensive and constructive comments, feedback, and we are in the process of organizing these to both respond to the specific questions posed in the charge from the Delta Stewardship Council, and we are that's coming together, and we will be also providing in appendices some of the more detailed editorial comments that have been contributed by members of the board for consideration by the Delta Stewardship Council as this moves forward. Overall, the comments are are supportive in terms of our answers to the questions posed, and have additional details or approaches to consider that we will be mentioning in our comments. And so we're again making headway, and the thoughtfulness of the members of the board in terms of reading the plan carefully, and the different sections are going to be, I'm confident that this will be useful feedback for the Delta Stewardship Council. Tanya, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, that was a good summary of where we are with the process, Diane. I guess the only thing I would add is that, you know, in trying to synthesize these comments and really provide a feedback review or letter that's going to be readable and digestible, Diane and I may have to make some executive decisions about what to prioritize, at least in the front end of this review letter. Just because there's a lot for us to wade through. Certainly we can put a lot of the detailed editorial suggestions into an appendix and you know, ensure we try not to lose some of those important comments. But I guess if there's anything in your comments that you're like, oh, if this gets lost, I'm really going to be upset. Please reach out to Diane or I, or comment, let us know if there's something that you think should be elevated from the comments that you sent, because it's not our intention to ignore anyone, just we want to make sure that we're putting together a document that's going to be useful and feasible to digest.
All right. Thank you very much, Diane and Tanya, and also for leading this effort. Are there any questions from the board at this point? I see one raised hand. Lisa?
Well, Tanya and Diane, I'm a little surprised to hear you got so many detailed comments. So I feel your pain about having to synthesize that and generalize. I think because the time frame was short, I know from my perspective, it's easier to focus on some smaller issues rather than think very strategically. So it's possible that you might use this time we have right now to get us to pull out the bigger picture items from our comments. And I have something to offer. I reviewed my comments and I think there were some things that were responsive to the questions, but some things that weren't. And I'd be happy to sort of boil them down in a way that might be useful, and maybe others could do the same. Is that something that's desirable at this point?
I would say that maybe the time to do that is when you see the draft. Right now, we have a scheme, if you will, of we think we've pulled out ideas and feedback that go in different places. So if we're able to have a draft in a week and a half, then that might be the right time. But if you want to send an email, you know, let us know now what because you would be doing this, not necessarily thinking about the other, how we're visioning fitting what you've said in yet. And then you could tell us, well, no, that's not actually the way what I meant. Anyway, Tanya, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I mean, unless there's something, Lisa, that you didn't have already in your comments that has been kind of emerging as you've gone back and looked at this, and you wanted to share something now that you think would be useful. That we need to add
possibly.
in?
I mean,
Yeah.
you should feel free to ignore it if it doesn't
Yeah.
fit in your schema. Why does the resource agency have its hand up?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, this is Edmund, the meeting clerk. I do have a note from Rachel Kloppenstein of the science program, who said if you do have thoughts, they would like to hear it earlier rather than later, even if it might not make it into the review.
Okay, so there may be a place, even if you don't exactly use their comments, perhaps hearing from the board would be helpful for them. So there's another reason to say a few things. So my comments are pretty brief. I mean, I was just going to say that, you know, I do think they've thought very well about these grand challenges. It's obviously very difficult to think comprehensively and broadly about science needs, and I think they've done an excellent job. I think they've been very responsive to things that the ISB has produced in terms of the monitoring review and the DMDU, and that's the decision making under deep uncertainty. So I was just generally very pleased with the approach. But as I was looking back at those grand challenge questions that were just resent, not the grand challenge questions, the review questions. I mean, the main thing that struck me is, and this is pretty common in plans, and that's not to recognize that resources are always limited for pursuing all these goals. And so the things that I thought were missing, and don't necessarily have to be perfectly addressed in this round, but I think it's something they should be thinking about moving forward, is that I didn't see a good recognition that decision science tools and modeling tools can help focus research on the most consequential questions in terms of science needs and decision support. So I think there's something to be said about using structured decision making, not literally, I don't mean that specifically like that particular type of decision support tool, but in general using some kind of structured tool to think about adaptive management in particular, and to refine some of the ideas of which science is needed. And I think that particularly applies to the social science. I think the idea that we need more social science is obviously very welcome to my ears as a social scientist, but it's also still pretty general and doesn't really outline any sort of first things to go after in terms of social science. And maybe that's by design. Maybe we want to hear what the social scientists think could be useful. But I think going forward, there should be more emphasis on thinking about priorities in the social science tools. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Just a quick response to that, Lisa. I think you hit on a couple key points that I had brought up in my review as well. And I pulled also some, I think, implicit points that you were getting at on that issue too. And so, yeah, those ideas about the need to really prioritize which social science questions or which questions social science can contribute to in the Delta, or which priorities, I think is already in the draft that we're working on. And I really like your addition too of thinking about the decision support tools or the modeling tools and what's going to help with the most consequential decisions. So yeah, we're working in that direction.
Yes, and we're acknowledging in this first question we were given is this plan bold? We're recognizing that it's bold it's an important step forward to engage social science and bring forward to the research, the social sciences. And I would comment that the report that the presentation we've heard just before this session of our meeting highlights the ways in which community engagement and the farmers recognizing what they can do and all that is key to moving forward in addressing the challenges of the Delta in terms of the risks associated with sea level rise and potential levee failure. So yeah, just wanted to make that point.
So I have my hand raised. I was just wondering if the members of the board would like to maybe, just for the sake of the authors of the plan, to hear a little bit sooner than a month from now from us, would like to maybe mention their main points. Diane, oh, you're looking at me.
It's okay, yeah.
Since Lisa just did that, I wonder how useful it would be if whoever wants to say something and speak to their main impression about the draft plan.
Can I, if we go that way, could I just make one more comment?
Well,
so
if we go that way,
do you want to go that way? I mean,
posing the question, if we have enough people interested in saying something, yes, let's do it. Yeah.
Well,
I prefer not to be the only one.
Okay, I would also interject that in this draft that Tanya and I are working on, we are highlighting the point, which is also apparent from the presentation we just heard about possibly the need to, or the benefit of bringing forward more clearly the physical aspects, the hydrology, the subsidence issue in this plan. So we were asked, is this plan, and the second question, is this appropriate? And we're saying, well, maybe greater acknowledgement of the changes in the physical system and the need to address that would be even more appropriate compared to how the plan is presented right now. So I wanted to let the board members know that this was the direction we were heading in terms of the response to question 2, that yes, definitely generally appropriate, but greater emphasis on the physical science side of the issues may be beneficial going forward in the plan.
Okay. Well, if it's okay with you and Tanya, I would like to invite the members of the board, those who would like to speak up at this point and say something, to raise their hands. Everybody is saying me. No, I don't see. Okay, Kathleen. We can't hear
You're
you.
muted. You're muted.
Sorry, I must have double clicked. Okay. Yeah, I spent a long time looking at the report, and one of the things I did note was the lack of discussion about subsidence and levees and the infrastructure that maintains the water supply and how it relates itself to maintaining the ecosystem of the Delta and the livelihood of the people there. So I would really appreciate the fact that you're going to be putting that in. I also want to say, going back to using models to inform science gaps and identify the gaps that need to be addressed more clearly. I think that one of the things I noted was that I think that the requests on modeling that are in Action 1 should be split so that there's a modeling for Action 1, which looks at the long-term modeling, where you integrate data into the models to allow you to do calibration and validation and dynamically update these models for the long-term predictions. That's kind of one action, one type of modeling that fits in Action 1 versus what's essentially described right now in the document, which is more focused on not integrating the model, but doing a comparison between models and current day data. And that's sort of fits more into Action 2, which is looking at more of the tactical things, the things that are happening now or in the short term. So I actually think that that's an important thing to bring in. It's a separate issue than is in there right now. And I'd really like to see those two things included. One, the modeling breakout, and two, the discussion more of the physical landscape.
Thank you, Kathleen. Would anybody else like to speak up? Tanya?
Yeah, I guess one thing that I noticed when I was reviewing all of the comments, and this might come up under the kind of second guiding question that we received from the science program around whether the actions are appropriate, actionable, and feasible, is that several, I think, board members mentioned some of the challenges and potential opportunities for better tracking the success of the plan, the implementation of the plan. And I think, there possibly some of these questions might veer into the scope of the science action agenda, but I think that there was enough consensus from the comments that I saw around a need for just ensuring more kind of accountability and understanding of, how well are we doing in terms of the plan. And so I think, Diana and I are starting to kind of pull together some of the different ways that folks talked about that challenge of making this actionable, but also, accountable to the communities that the science plan is going to speak to. So, yeah, stay tuned for more on that, but just wanted to at least acknowledge that was a common theme.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm hoping that these comments help the authors a little bit before we submit our full or our final comments. And otherwise, thank you again, Tanya and Diane, for taking this on, for summarizing this. It's a big chore. So,
I would say it's clearly a way in which the board can be helpful. So yes, it's not just a chore. Yes.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, so no more raised hands, so we'll leave it at that. Are there any public comments at this point?
There are no public comments, but since this is also a major agenda item, I just want to give a few more seconds for folks to find their raise hand function. So let's give it a few seconds. And there are none.
Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I ask, are there any public comments for matters that are not on the agenda?
Yep, doesn't look like there are any public comments not on the agenda.
Okay. So in that case, I hand over to you, Edmund, for the preparation for upcoming Delta ISB meetings and items to follow up.
Yes. So in terms of preparation for future meetings, our next one will be virtual on February 18th. The major discussion item for that meeting will be the Delta Science plan. Tanya and Diane will release a draft for board discussion before that meeting. And as discussed during this meeting, one of the follow-up items for the board is as you review that draft, if there are comments that you feel that need to be elevated to the main content of the letter, feel free to bring that up for discussion in February. And then we also plan to have a lead scientist report in February and discuss progress on current reviews, but have not yet selected the review topics to focus on for that meeting. That's all we have for preparation for the February meeting. In terms of follow-up items, in addition to the science plan review that I just mentioned, the other one is today, Dr. Kathleen Jones made a declaration about her adjunct appointment, and we'll go ahead and update that on our welcome and declaration record. And that's all I have for the follow-up items and meeting prep. Any questions?
Nope. I don't see any raised hands. Thank you very much.
And there are no public comments.
No public comments. And with that, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for being here, and happy travels to everyone who's all over the world here. Thank you.
Thank you.